In Mundus, a civilization does not survive because it is strong, righteous, brutal, or unified. It lasts longer than founding generations for a simpler reason. It manages to pass on a way of living that still makes sense to people who did not choose it. That is the real test. Founders endure struggle directly. Those who come after inherit something else entirely: rules, stories, habits, expectations. They are asked to live inside a structure they did not design, for reasons they did not personally discover. If that structure cannot carry them without constant explanation or force, it begins to fail. In Mundus, this is what a civilization actually needs. A civilization must offer a shared explanation that still fits daily life. Not truth, not precision, an explanation that works. It must answer in a usable way why people work as they do, why some decide and others obey, why suffering appears here and not there, and why certain sacrifices are expected at all. As long as daily experience and explanation still align, people can inhabit the system without friction. When that alignment weakens, something subtle happens. People may still comply, they may still repeat the words, but the explanation no longer feels like it applies to them. It becomes something said, not something lived. In Mundus, that quiet gap is where decline begins. A civilization must also be able to outlive the people who founded it. This means authority must be transferable, roles must be repeatable, decisions must be possible even when those making them are less capable, less inspired, or less invested than the original builders. For this reason, lasting institutions in Mundus tend to become dull. This feels like decay, but it is not. Brilliant systems die with their creators. Blunt systems persist, because they can be operated by ordinary people, generation after generation, without collapse. What looks like loss of greatness is often the price of survival. No civilization in Mundus lasts without a way to absorb internal conflict. Every generation produces disagreement about fairness, about direction, about who benefits and who bears the cost. A lasting civilization provides places for that tension to go, legal channels for dispute, rituals that drain resentment, shared stories that allow people to argue without rejecting the entire structure. Civilizations do not fall because people argue. They fall when argument becomes existential, when disagreement is treated as a threat to the system itself. When conflict has nowhere to land, it becomes civil war, schism, or quiet disengagement. Most importantly, a civilization must give people a reason to endure that does not require understanding. This is subtle, and in Mundus, it matters more than almost anything else. Most people do not live philosophically. They live habitually. A civilization survives when people keep going even after the reasons become blurry, when the system still functions without requiring constant insight, reflection, or conviction. This is why traditions, routines, and even false explanations persist in Mundus. They allow people to endure without needing to be fully awake to the system they inhabit. Meaning becomes optional. Continuity does not. What civilizations in Mundus always get wrong is that they mistake what helped them begin for what will allow them to last. Founders needed clarity. Later generations need function. Civilizations try to preserve original ideals, pure doctrine, founding values. But clarity is expensive. Most people cannot afford it indefinitely, so it is imitated, then enforced, and eventually defended against those who notice the difference. Another mistake follows quickly. Early unity came from shared struggle. Later unity must come from shared structure, not shared belief. Civilizations that demand agreement turn disagreement into betrayal, adaptation into heresy, and survival into obedience. This accelerates collapse. The most dangerous error, however, is confusing longevity with correctness. A civilization that lasts a long time begins to believe its way is natural. Its laws reflect reality itself, and its gods or principles must be right, simply because they endured. When reality changes, as it always does, the civilization does not adapt. It doubles down. Longevity hardens into rigidity. Rigidity becomes fragility. As trust fades, control increases. Laws tighten, punishments grow harsher, symbols become louder, enforcement grows more visible. This can extend survival briefly, but control preserves behavior, not meaning. Once meaning is gone, the structure becomes hollow, and hollow structures collapse suddenly. In Mundus, the final truth is this: a civilization lasts longer than one generation, only if it allows people to live inside it imperfectly. The moment a system demands full belief, full alignment, or full understanding, it begins to die, not immediately, but quietly and from within. Across all layers of Mundus, what survives longest is not the strongest civilization, or the wisest, or the most just. It is the one that tolerates partial belief, uneven understanding, quiet withdrawal, and tolerated hypocrisy. These civilizations feel compromised. They feel impure. They feel disappointing. They last. And what Mundus records every time is not that civilizations die when people stop believing in them, but that they end when people can no longer live inside them without breaking themselves.